Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining the last Talking ASEAN seminar this year, and welcome to the Habibie Center. My name is Marina, and I am a researcher at the ASEAN Studies Program. So today, I'll be moderating the discussion on the timely topic welcoming Timor-Leste to ASEAN, opportunities, challenges, and strategic implication. And before we begin, please allow me to explain the issue briefly. As we all know that Timor-Leste was formally admitted as the 11th ASEAN member on 26th of October 2025, especially during the 47th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This accession marks the long journey process, 14 years, starting from its first official application in 2011, and after that, Timor-Leste was admitted in principle and became an observer in 2022. The process was so long that President Jose Ramos Horta once joked that joining ASEAN was more difficult than entering heaven. Timor-Leste's entry into ASEAN open up new opportunities, not only for Timor-Leste itself, but also for the region. Why? Because the country has a growing youth population, and it also has a strategic location connecting Southeast Asia and the Pacific, and the potential as a bridge between ASEAN and also Portuguese-speaking communities around the world. But at the same time, the challenges remain, including the need to strengthen economic development, human capital, infrastructure, and also digital connectivity. Following its accession, it will be more important to observe how Timor-Leste advances its development and how ASEAN as a regional organization can support Timor-Leste in strengthening its institutional capacity. Therefore, to discuss it more deeply, we are highly pleased to have three distinguished speakers. The first one is His Excellency Ambassador Joaquim da Fonseca, joining us virtually. He is the Secretary General of RENETIL and the Ambassador of Timor-Leste to the UN from 2009 to 2013, and the Ambassador of Timor-Leste to the UK from 2013 to 2019. And our second speaker is Professor Anders Ullin. He is the professor at the Department of Political Science at Lund University. And last but not least, we have Ibu Dina Prapto Raharja, PhD, the Executive Director and co-founder of Synergy Policies. Welcome, Ambassador Fonseca, Professor Ullin, and Dr. Dina. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us at the Habibie Center. So with them in this forum, we'll discuss the overview of Timor-Leste's long journey to ASEAN membership, and then we'll also explore the opportunities and challenges faced by Timor-Leste following its accession, and identify key implications of Timor-Leste's admission to ASEAN, both for Timor-Leste and the region. And the important thing is to provide actionable recommendation for ASEAN and its external partners to support Timor-Leste in strengthening its capacity as the youngest member of ASEAN. And for your information, the seminar will be divided into two sessions. The first session is the presentation from the speakers with 15 to 20 minutes allocated time respectively. The first speaker will be Ambassador Fonseca, followed by Professor Ullin and Dr. Dina as the last speaker. And after the presentation are delivered, we will move on to the Q&A session. And during the Q&A session, the audience present here can ask questions directly, while those joining online, you can write down your questions or comments on the live chat feature. So without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Joaquim da Fonseca. He is currently serving as the Secretary General of RENETIL and the spokesperson for the Working Group on Timorese Reconciliation. He has more than 20 years of experience in diplomacy, policy analysis, and conflict resolution. He has served as the Ambassador of Timor-Leste to the UN, Switzerland, and Monaco from 2009 to 2013. Additionally, he held the position of the Ambassador of Timor-Leste to the UK and Netherlands from 2013 to 2019. With his experience as a diplomat, I'd like to invite Ambassador Fonseca to share the overview of Timor-Leste's accession process, as well as the opportunities and challenges for Timor-Leste as a new ASEAN member. Over to you, Ambassador Fonseca.
Thank you very much, moderator. Sorry, I didn't really catch your name. Could you repeat it for me so I can address you properly?
Yeah, my name is Marina, Ambassador.
Yes, good afternoon, Marina. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's a great pleasure for me to join you on this discussion. Obviously, the issue of accession of Timor-Leste to ASEAN has been very broadly discussed here in Timor-Leste prior to the accession itself and after. Nonetheless, I have to apologize for not having prepared a more extensive, with depth and in-depth analysis presentation for this event, this discussion, because of the shortage of time. Nonetheless, I will try my best to lay out what I think we should pay attention in relations to Timor-Leste's accession to ASEAN. Obviously, as the speaker mentioned at the beginning, this accession opens up an opportunity not just for Timor-Leste, but hopefully for the region as a whole. Timor-Leste, going from a nation, from post-conflict identity to becoming a stakeholder of a $3.8 trillion economic bloc, which is ASEAN. In this presentation, I will discuss some of the structural challenges and including what we call here in Timor-Leste the briefcase companies phenomenon, stagnations in some sectors of development, and other issues which Timor-Leste has to overcome to avoid its membership in ASEAN from becoming a dependency trap, while of course at the same time highlight the other benefits that Timor-Leste will get from becoming a full member of ASEAN. To the second slide. So the road to accession is already been mentioned. In 2011, an application was submitted, and then 10 years later, it was agreed on principle that Timor-Leste can become a member, and then this year in October, the full membership was approved. The government of Timor-Leste obviously has had to do its part after the publication, the issuance of the roadmap, acceptance of the roadmap by ASEAN, by revising certain laws. And at this point, 30 laws we know have been revised to be in conformity with ASEAN legal frameworks, as well as the designation of 400,000 annual contribution to ASEAN Secretariat. So we know that that has happened since the leading up to and after the formal acceptance of Timor-Leste as a member. So what do we get then? What are we expecting to get? The first is obviously the economic benefit. Timor-Leste being a country with a very small population, 1.3 million, suddenly now have a market of 680 million opened to it. This means that Timor-Leste can now export making use of the benefit of ATIGA, ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, where tariff for exportation is basically slashed, to export its goods to ASEAN with a population of 680 million. And hopefully, with also the importation cost being reduced, the cost of living in Dili can be lowered, and more money can be pumped into more productive endeavors rather than just to sustain living in Delhi, which is very expensive at the moment. Of course, the government needs to put in place certain safeguards to make sure that these ATIGA, which obviously other ASEAN members will also benefit from in relations to its economic cooperation with Timor-Leste, does not make Timor-Leste further developed, become further dependent on other ASEAN countries in relations to other products. For example, right now, Timor-Leste is importing up to 60% of its consumer goods, and that has to change, hopefully, with the accession to ASEAN. But for that to happen, obviously, the government of Timor-Leste needs to put in place some safeguards. To the next slide. So another opportunity that is also open for Timor-Leste is what we know in ASEAN as regional accumulation opportunity. Previously, obviously, it was very difficult to produce anything. Industry is basically non-existence, if you like, in Timor-Leste because of the cost of importation, the high cost of importation, high cost of production here in Timor-Leste. But with the accession to ASEAN, hopefully, we can now imagine a scenario where raw materials are imported from some ASEAN countries, let's say Vietnam. I use Vietnam as an example, but it could be any other ASEAN country, and could be processed here in Timor-Leste, and the final product will be then exported to other ASEAN countries. I put Indonesia here for proximity, but it could be any other ASEAN country, and it is not just textile, it could be any other things, secondary product. So there are also, of course, as you know, one of the municipalities of Timor-Leste, Oikusi, is designated as a special economic region where there is incentive for investment, such as tax holidays and so on. And hopefully that will attract other investors from ASEAN to invest in such endeavor as I mentioned. But of course, there are other things that obviously need to be put in place. Right now, Oikusi is rather isolated, so we need to work on how to make it more accessible, both in and out, because there is no point in producing anything anywhere if you cannot send them outside into the market. Of course, Timor-Leste has maintained a very neutral posture when it comes to the issue of security. It makes Timor-Leste makes friends with everybody, but in the recent years, when we intensified the infrastructure development, most investments have come from China. And while at the same time we have been conducting a lot of military cooperation in defense, in the area of defense with Australia, the United States, and so on. But that sometimes can be problematic, and the accession to ASEAN hopefully can put a new brand on Timor-Leste. So we have become part of a neutral bloc. A bloc which also makes friends with everybody, cooperate economically with everybody, as well as in the area of defense. So this is kind of a shield, a geopolitical shield for Timor-Leste to continue to pursue its economic development without having to worry about, other defense and security concerns, which could arise from dichotomy exist in the world. To the next slide. So it has been smooth. The previous slides, when I mentioned everything was very positive, but there are some things that we need to pay attention. In Timor-Leste, we know, I think this term is also known elsewhere, briefcase companies. Some people come as investors and they don't have an office, they just have a briefcase, sometimes even just a mobile phone. And they here seeking to find partners, local partners. And then once they have a partner, they then register with a survey to get investor certificate. And then once it is there, instead of bringing investment, because people are very excited when they talk about investment. We are bringing investment from such and such country and so on. But what happens is that they ended up bidding for public contracts, government contracts. And what in the end happened, the end result is that they get the money, they leave the country. So instead of bringing money into Timor-Leste, these briefcase companies are known to be taking money out of Timor-Leste. We only have, averagely $2 billion budget every year, and much of it is extracted from Timor-Leste because of, among others, these kind of practices. This needs to stop, because when people come in as investors, they get all sorts of benefits. No taxes, all sorts of facilitations, and in the end, when they ended up not bringing money, there is a great loss. That is a great loss for Timor-Leste. And the next slide, the second structural challenge is there is a labor paradox. When we look at Timor-Leste's economy, when we look at investment, when we talk about joining ASEAN, all the benefits of Artiga exportation possibilities and so on, one presumes that you need labor force to work on, and industry actually to produce the goods or to enter ASEAN economy. There may well be a labor force to work on those industries, but who are they? Where do they send the money they receive? What kind of other benefits which the country will get from their employment? The fact is that right now Timor-Leste sends quite a great number of young people, actually young people, to work overseas. In Australia, in Korea, in the UK, Japan, and there is a continuing efforts to export labor force from Timor-Leste. While at the same time, we are already witnessing certain agricultural projects which brought in workers from China and Indonesia, supposedly skilled agricultural workers. Now the number is not great. It's still limited. Only 2 or 3 companies are doing this. But in the long run, this is not positive for Timor-Leste, because on one hand, we need boost our economy, and on the other hand, we we export them. And this is something that is besides the economic problem that will come from this practice. There is also another long-term issue, which I will highlight in the next slide. Fiji, in the end of the 19th century, the British brought in indentured labor from India to work on the sugar plantation. And as we all know, today, they are still living with the consequences. The social divide, the dual economy that was caused by that practice still being, the consequences are still being dealt with by Fijian today. If we let this practice of importing foreign workers and exporting Timorese, it is even worse because numerically, Timor is a very small, has a very small population. It is going to be very difficult to outmatch the imported labors in number and in skills if we continue to export our workforce. So this is, a very, very serious risk for Timor-Leste. So how do we deal with this? In my view, I think we need to dismantle the rent-seeking, the practices of briefcase companies. They need to stop. They need to be stopped. And we need to fix agriculture. Statistically, 70 to 80% of Timorese population live in the area of agriculture. They depend on agriculture to live. But the current contribution of agriculture to our economy is quite small. So statistically, if you just change the agricultural productivity, it will have a great effect in the economy. And the third is actually to deal with this imported labor force and make it so that only certain areas where expertise are not found among the Timorese workers that we import foreign workers, especially in the areas, like small industries, agriculture, so on, not something high-end. And implement, the fourth is to implement, to be in ASEAN, implement the digital leapfrog, the ASEAN digital economy framework. So to the last slide, in conclusion, while the road to ASEAN has been one of diplomacy, the life in ASEAN is one of productivity, and Timor-Leste needs to use this opportunity as a mechanism. The membership of ASEAN is a mechanism that force the country to be more productive, to train people to be technically more skilled, more prepared, not just to contribute to the Timor-Leste's economy by working here, but also possessing the ability to work elsewhere, more competitive elsewhere in other ASEAN countries, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia. This is probably a dream that will only come through in maybe 1 or 2 decades, but at least the membership of ASEAN has become a forcing mechanism for this to happen. And I end my presentation here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Fonseca, for the insightful presentation. And I noted several things that you mentioned about benefits for Timor-Leste after joining ASEAN from the economic field and also geopolitical perspectives. But I'm also curious about what is Timor-Leste greatest strategic value for ASEAN in terms of political economy and also geostrategic implication. But I'll get back to you, Ambassador. Maybe we can discuss more during the Q&A session. And
Okay,
now,
certainly. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Ambassador. And now I'd like to invite the second speaker, Professor Anders Ullin. He is a professor of political science at Lund University, Sweden. His research is in the fields of global and regional governance, civil society, and democratization. He has published many articles, book chapters on civil society activism and processes of legitimation and delegitimation of international organizations with a focus of Southeast Asia. Professor Ullin is currently conducting research on legitimacy challenges and processes of legitimation related to ASEAN. Professor Ullin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction and for inviting me to be part of this Talking ASEAN. I have a long-term interest in not only in Indonesian politics and indeed also in Timor-Leste, but also in as you refer to, the legitimacy of international organizations, focusing specifically on ASEAN now in my current research. And by legitimacy, I refer to how different state and non-state act. Does this work? Okay. Sorry. So I have an interest in the legitimacy of international organizations and currently working on a book on ASEAN from this perspective. And by legitimacy, I refer to what extent different state and non-state actors consider the exercise of authority of an international organization to be rightful in terms of its performance or in terms of its decision making and so on. So I'm gathering different perspectives from state and non-state actors. So that's kind of my background here, from what perspective I engage with the questions we're going to discuss here. Do we have my presentation? No. Oh yeah, yeah. So I will take this quotation that Marina referred to in the introduction from President Ramos Horta, that sometimes the path to ASEAN feels more difficult than the path to heaven. And so I think what needs to be explained here is the delay in admission. Doesn't seem to work. Okay. So it's been a long history, and I will be very brief on this. But I think actually, even when Fretilin declared independence back in 1975, they showed an interest in ASEAN. But then, of course, ASEAN member states considered Timor-Leste to be a communist threat, and they fully supported Indonesia's invasion and continue to support the occupation, even after the Dili massacre in 1991, when international criticism increased. There were some members of democratically elected governments in the Philippines and Thailand that started to criticize Indonesia's human rights abuses in East Timor. But to a large extent, the member states of ASEAN did not support East Timor. On the people's level, however, kind of solidarity emerged between the Indonesian democracy movement and East Timorese independence activists, and also in the wider region, for instance, with the Asia-Pacific Coalition in East Timor. So on a people level, there were already some integration, in a sense. Then, as we all know, the fall of Suharto paved the way for independence for East Timor. Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand contributed the peacekeepers at that time. And ASEAN, at least reluctantly, accepted Timor-Leste's independence in 2002. Timor-Leste did show an interest in ASEAN from the beginning, joined the ASEAN Regional Forum in 2005, signed the ASEAN's Treaty on Amity and Cooperation in 2007, and as we heard from the previous speaker, applied in 2011. But it was not until 2022 that ASEAN agreed in principle to admit Timor-Leste as a member. And as we all know, the full membership occurred at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur recently. So I think it has been a quite long process from 2011 until 2025, especially if we compare it to the previous new members in the 1990s. That process was much quicker and seemed to be less complicated, although one would expect the admission of countries like Vietnam and Laos, where the Communist Party was still ruling, as they are today as well, that admitting those countries into from the beginning very anti-communist ASEAN would be much more complicated than East Timor. And I think there are quite obvious reasons for ASEAN member states to welcome Timor-Leste, and I will return to the value for ASEAN of Timor-Leste membership soon. But I think we need to ask why did it take so long time, and why was it so complicated? I think Indonesia and the Philippines have been those supporting Timor-Leste's membership. Malaysia also during this final year, I think. So those who have been most hesitant have been Singapore, Cambodia, Laos, and of course also Myanmar. And the main reasons for the delay have been economic. So it has been argued that Timor-Leste's economic limitations will be a burden for ASEAN. This is an argument that has come mainly from Singapore, I think. But also political reasons, that the enlargement going from 10 to 11 members would complicate the consensus decision making. And then we have, of course, the specific problem for Myanmar, because Timor-Leste's leaders have consistently been very critical to human rights atrocities committed by the Myanmar military, and they've been more outspoken than other government representatives in Southeast Asia. But altogether, I think that this delay demonstrates ASEAN's institutional limitations in terms of the consensus decision making and so on. Let's look at the economic or socio-economic argument. I here present the Human Development Index, the most recent available, for ASEAN member states. So the Human Development Index is composed of gross national income per capita. It's also about education and expected life expectancy, and so it's about socio-economic development. And the score is between 0 and 1. I also provide a rank in the world here, and as you can see, it ranges from Singapore, ranked number 13 in the world, which of course is better than most European countries, down to Myanmar as number 150 in the world. There is also categorization, very high human development, the greens here, Singapore, Brunei, Malaysia. High human development, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And medium human development, Timor-Leste, Laos, Myanmar. And Cambodia, it's not visible here, but they are at the bottom actually. So what does this table tell us? I think the main message here is that Timor-Leste does not stand out. It's a poor country. It's a medium human development country. It's not in the low human development category. No ASEAN member state is in that category. But Timor-Leste actually scores better than 3 of the existing members of ASEAN, Laos, Myanmar, and Cambodia. If we instead look at the political situation and look at the democracy, here we have the varieties of democracy, liberal democracy index. I think this is maybe the most sophisticated democracy index. It's based on expert assessments of a large number of dimensions of democracy and various indicators. So this is a combined index. Like the HDI, it ranges from 0 to 1. And there are scores, ranks, and categorization given in this table. So VDEM works with basically 4 types of regimes: liberal democracies, electoral democracies, electoral autocracies, and closed autocracies. And as you can see here, Timor-Leste performs actually much better in terms of democracy than any of the 10 other member states of ASEAN. It's the only one that is clearly categorized as an electoral democracy. Malaysia also, but in a gray zone, quite far below Timor-Leste. And then we have 4 countries that are considered electoral autocracies now: Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand. And the closed autocracies: Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Brunei. And again, Cambodia is not visible here in my slide, but it's in the bottom. And Myanmar, sorry, is not visible. Cambodia is visible. And then there is also the direction. Timor-Leste, together with Thailand, is the only country that has a positive trend of improving its democracy, whereas 2 very important countries in ASEAN, Indonesia and the Philippines, are actually backsliding. So I think this indicates that Timor-Leste's membership might have implications for the political dynamics within ASEAN in terms of democracy and human rights. It's at least another strong voice for democracy and human rights in the regional organization. All right, so what then is the value of membership in ASEAN for Timor-Leste? And I think Ambassador da Fonseca referred to the economic values in quite some detail. And yeah, I agree that the access to the large regional market is of course a great value, which will mean lower tariffs on exports and higher quality imports for Timor-Leste. But I think it's important to see this in a more long-term perspective. The economic integration within ASEAN has to be gradual, I think, to safeguard domestic industries. But this is just like previous new members. So I would like to stress that it's a long-term process and we should not expect any immediate gains. Maybe most important is peace and stability in the region. As a very small, poor country, Timor-Leste, of course, is very dependent on peaceful and stable relationships, especially to its big neighbor, Indonesia. But this is, I think, further strengthened in this regional context in ASEAN. And one might also view this as a recognition of its achievements since independence, that it is welcome in an organization like ASEAN. So what then is the value of Timor-Leste's membership for ASEAN? Yeah, someone said it completes the family. And if you look at the map of Southeast Asia, it's quite clear that Timor-Leste belongs to Southeast Asia. And it has a very strategic location geopolitically between, well, in the whole Indo-Pacific context. So I think for ASEAN it's important to have Timor-Leste as a member. The alternative might have been Timor-Leste being outside of ASEAN and aligning more maybe with China, also for military defense and so on, which would have been problematic for ASEAN. Yeah, for my specific interest in processes of legitimation, I think joining an international organization is an act of legitimation. And as I indicated before, I think Timor-Leste's membership strengthens democracy and human rights approaches, and in this way might boost ASEAN's legitimacy both externally and among its citizens. So my final slide, to sum up the implications of Timor-Leste's membership for ASEAN in 4 points. Timor-Leste will need substantial support in developing human resources and infrastructure to be able to fully participate in ASEAN, especially if it's going to share ASEAN already in 2029. Economic integration will have to be gradual, but this is already the case for other member states. And Timor-Leste could strengthen democracy and human rights approach, changing the political dynamics in ASEAN. I also think that Timor-Leste could play a constructive role in solving the Myanmar problem that fundamentally undermines ASEAN's legitimacy. This of course remains to be seen to what extent Timor-Leste will be able to live up to the high expectations there, but I'm happy to return to this question in the Q&A session, but I stop my talk here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Olin. You presented the comprehensive presentation. I highlighted some important points. You mentioned about the history of Timor-Leste's engagement with ASEAN. You also mentioned about some factors influence the long process of Timor-Leste to join ASEAN because of the differences, the different stances from the ASEAN member states, economic and political reasons, and also ASEAN's institutional limitation. And you also mentioned about the strategic values of Timor-Leste for ASEAN and vice versa. Thank you for touching that point. And maybe later on, you can also explore what are the most urgent challenges that must be addressed for Timor-Leste to participate actively in ASEAN. Thank you, Professor Olin. Now, before I turn to the Q&A session, I would like to gently remind the audience on YouTube that you can write down your questions or comments on the live chat feature. I'll read them out during the Q&A session. Now, I'd like to invite our final speaker, Ibu Dina Prapto Raharja, PhD. She is a senior policy advisor specializing in diplomacy, public policy, and social protection. She is also currently serving as the executive director and co-founder of Synergy Policies, an associate professor, tenured faculty member in the Department of IR at Binus University, Jakarta, and an expert for research and training programs at the Center for Social Security Studies at Universitas Indonesia. Previously, Dr. Dina also served as Indonesia's representative to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, from 2016 to 2018. Dr. Dina, we would like to hear your views on Timor-Leste's readiness to meet ASEAN standard, and how can ASEAN support Timor-Leste in strengthening its capacity? Yeah, you may take the floor, Dr. Dina.
Thank you so much, Marina, and my warm regards to all of you, and also to the panelists, Professor Anders, and also Ambassador Fonseca. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon. I think with Almarhum President B.J. Habibie overlooking all of us, it's very pertinent. I don't prepare any presentation, any slides, because I thought it's in the afternoon anyway. Let's just discuss, and I can provide several illustrations also about Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, ASEAN, and then Timor-Leste, ASEAN. And being the third speaker, you always need to be prepared not to repeat whatever the previous speaker speaks. That's why I don't prepare slides. Going back to the point why I mentioned Professor Habibie and also President Habibie as important figure for Timor-Leste, there is a Ponte B.J. Habibie in Timor-Leste, a bridge that Timor-Leste built to respect President Habibie. And so it's I think when I was invited here, I was thinking, it's very timely. I think it's time for me to go back and visit Habibie Center because of that. Congratulations to Timor-Leste and colleagues from Timor-Leste on the admission of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste into ASEAN. Especially, I would like to extend that congratulatory remark to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Excellency Bendito Freitas, who I know very well, and also the Vice Minister, Milena Maria da Costa Rangel. Hopefully, Ambassador can extend my congratulatory remark to them as well. It so happened that for us, for Timor-Leste, ASEAN has always been very important. I teach also in Timor-Leste for several trainings that they have in MENEC. MENEC is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Timor-Leste. And one of the things they've been wishing to know ever since before they were admitted to ASEAN was to learn more about ASEAN and how they can align themselves with the priorities of ASEAN. So I know they really, really want this. Timor-Leste really want this. So I'd like to start with the opportunities. And the opportunities, I would like to highlight two of the most important key identities of Timor-Leste, which I think nowadays become even more valuable for ASEAN. Number one, Timor-Leste is a democratic country. And why it's important? Especially, I would like to start from the fact that in reality, today, democratic countries has been argued as, peaceful, but you see everywhere, democratic countries actually launch hatred, racism, and even killings and genocides across the region, and they don't care about it. So it's one of the things that we learned back in school about democratic peace. And now we are facing the opposite of it. democratic country has been torn by populism, by self-centered leaders who wanted to show that success is based on personal strength and personal influence. I'd like to say this out loud and very clear, because why should we sugarcoat things, saying all these things is part of a democratic process? No, it's not. Even several of the major countries in the world have left the principles of democracy. So looking at Timor-Leste, it's a very dynamic country politically. It's not always easy, I know. There has been several times of government shutdowns also in Timor-Leste because of such dynamism, interlocking of political parties, wish that cannot be translated into budget. But the key point there is to remember not to follow, step away, please, Timor-Leste also from advancing this personal leadership in the region and in Timor-Leste, because that's the toxic part nowadays in democracies. Personal leadership may, easily draw attention, global attention even, but for sure it's not sustained. It's not going to sustain, and it's not congruent with the realities on the ground. Any personal leader cannot see thoroughly on social problems, let alone the cross-cutting of social, economy, and political problems. So that's the key part. And I think once you step into ASEAN, that's the part you have to, you start feeling, in meetings, in engagements. You can sense it. If the country is based on personal leadership, the way they engage other countries is really about the personal agenda, personal preferences of certain leaders. This is the part that Timor-Leste should show that this is not the way. And be confident in saying it's okay, because in ASEAN, in my own experience of engaging in ASEAN, you can be very amicable, but the door is closed anyway. In many forums, the door is closed. So you can be very frank to each other about what to do and not to do. So Timor-Leste, that's my one personal tip to you. Do not fall into personal leadership. Number two, I think as a democratic country, you should highlight issues that really affect your people. Timor-Leste have mentioned, Ambassador Fonseca mentioned earlier, the lack of economic development and such. I would like to pull it back even before we talk about development. You need to look into the people, because the people is the biggest asset for any country, actually. Even before you have resources, natural resources, or even frameworks of cooperations, number one, you have your people. So I would like to highlight the importance of certain agencies inside of ASEAN, aside from the G2G track, SOM, and the IRF and all. You should also think about the G2G track and about human rights, IHR. IHR, ACWC for women and children. This is a very important part of ASEAN that Timor-Leste should be investing more in, giving attention and doing a lot of engagements. Several key issues I would like to propose is, number one, person with disabilities. Timor-Leste has a challenge, in terms of the number of people with disabilities. Not only those that are already identified as disabled, mostly because of their physical disability, but just like the case in Indonesia, it takes years for us to realize that disability is not just about physical. There's the mental and also the intellectual disability, and all of those people are part of ASEAN. And ASEAN already have the ASEAN mainstreaming agenda. It has the enabling master plan to enable persons with disabilities in politics, in economy, and also in social lives. These agenda are very specific. If you look up this enabling master plan, which was produced under my tenure in IHR, but it has not been really activated at the national levels. The ASEAN Secretariat for several years did activated it, but you know, I guess aligned with the declining of democracy and principles of human rights across the region, this whole agenda is just, you know, withering. So let's come back to that, because Timor-Leste, Indonesian people, there are 38.8 million people at least as registered in BPS, yeah, in the statistics agencies, are persons with disabilities. So we do need to advance this agenda. Number two, as you mentioned, mobility of people is one key character in Timor-Leste. And I would like to proudly say that we should be very clear that mobility of people is a right. The right to work and to move across border is protected by international law. So what we can do is not ban them from going, but instead make sure that there are more and more corporations that appreciate our citizens anywhere they go, that they will get appreciated. So that part, I think Timor-Leste can be a very important partner to Indonesia, which at this point is still struggling to make that a reality, especially given the rising racism and anti-migrants growing across the more established industries, yeah, industrialized countries. The third is Timor-Leste and us and Indonesia is also part of this. We have been doing a lot of capacity building on disaster relief also with Timor-Leste, and it's you know, more and more important. Why? Because climate change, climate disasters is becoming more and more a threat to the region. So we should put ASEAN in the heart of this and make ASEAN see this as an important implementation of democratic and human rights principles. So those are the three items, I think, why Timor-Leste can be a very powerful force together with Indonesia in ASEAN. The second character of ASEAN, of Timor-Leste, that's also very important and also aligned with Indonesia, is Timor-Leste is a maritime country. So we barely talk about Timor-Leste, and I think based on my many times of visiting Timor-Leste, this identity of being a maritime country is still very weak, which is unfortunate. Because, and also in Indonesia, I know it's very hard, right, to believe that we are a maritime country. We keep saying it, but we don't quite actually think and do as a maritime country. Why? Because almost 2/3 of the world is ocean. And ocean is an important carbon sink. It's an important tool to neutralize this carbon gas emission that is creating disasters across the world. So there's no other time than now to actually act together and make the ASEAN Blue Economic Framework 2023 really have a body, have a content. 2023, 2 years ago, but if you look at the items of this framework, none of it is truly materializing in ASEAN. Why? Because the only people being engaged in there are engineers and people who are working in the marine sector. While in reality, you can never talk about blue economy without the economist, without the political scientist, without the sociologist, anthropologist. We are talking about transforming people's mindset to stop exploiting the ocean and start sustaining, livelihood in the ocean, but still benefiting from, from the resources of the ocean, seas, and also fresh water. So a lot of activities can be done together. Indonesia have initiated many conservation management model, and based on one of the latest training I made in Timor-Leste in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the MENEC, the diplomats have identified, several conservation areas that they think should be promoted in ASEAN. So I would like to encourage them to continue on with that agenda and start identifying the enablers that will make the locals support this transformation of seeing themselves as the agent of change for the oceans. Indonesia have started several partnerships with non-ASEAN member states, the dialogue partners. I think, like for instance, with the EU, why don't Indonesia and Timor-Leste sit together and think about co-hosting several activities in ASEAN to highlight the importance of blue economy. Challenge. Okay, the question was also about the challenge. I think life is not going to be fun without challenges, right? So we have to be optimistic, even in the biggest challenges. Every time we fall, we have to find out the strength in us. So ASEAN is such a big organization. To be honest, when I look at the capacity of Timor-Leste, the first thing I was thinking when they entered ASEAN is that can they actually host hundreds of meetings per month for ASEAN meetings? Every year there are thousands of meetings, big and small. Sometimes, programs that can accept about 100 people. So not only financially, but also the capacity of hotels, transportation, even the roads, that's one. But I can assure you, the Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, among the diplomats, we also discuss about it, and they actually are eager to support Timor-Leste with protocol, with logistics, After all, nobody can fly to Dili without going through Bali. So Indonesia is actually keen to help you. So don't worry. Let's just discuss about it. How some of the events maybe can also be supported through Bali or stuff, or through Atambua maybe. I've been there. I saw the crossing, and I think Indonesia should think also about working together with Timor-Leste to build Atambua. Next, Timor-Leste is also ASEAN is also have a very big span of attention. The issues being discussed in ASEAN is very large. So the capacity of people and the number of diplomats in Timor-Leste is honestly too small compared to the number of issues and expertise required for ASEAN meetings. How to solve this? My suggestion is to focus on several champion issues. In the rest, you listen first. But be more active and present for the issues that Timor-Leste feel very passionate about. Co-host always with other member states, because at the end of the day, the world's attention to ASEAN is unavoidable. It's inevitable. So capacity building, substance or technical will always be available through ASEAN anyway. So I think at the end of the day, ASEAN will support each other. On geopolitics, Timor-Leste, maybe one thing I can share is that the rivalry between US and China may be very big in our neck of the wood, in our region, but we should also be pay attention, or we should also be careful, because some of these discourses are very US-centric. And oftentimes the issues that are raised in the mainstream media may not necessarily be our focus of attention. It shouldn't be blown up so much that we forgot about our own ASEAN agenda. So that's my only note. Oftentimes the social media talk, like for instance, I give you the example of let's be careful that China is going to grow and take over Taiwan by the time it reach 100 years. Like in reality, if you are actually every day on that topic, even confirmed by my colleagues, it's not gonna happen unless you actually provoked it to happen. So that's the example that we should be very careful about not just being brought along into the, agenda that's not actually ASEAN's agenda. Strategic implication, you also asked about strategic implications. I would like to highlight 3 items. Strategic implications for us, Timor-Leste joining ASEAN. Number 1, we can work together on people-oriented and people-centered policies. In Timor-Leste, for many years, you try to reform your education system, healthcare, and also various issues affecting people. But one that you should sort it, Timor-Leste should sort it based on which model Timor-Leste is going to use to start the reform. Too many capacity building will get you confused. So you better make up your mind as a country. I would like to use this model, let's say, focusing on how tax support, financing, and building facilities for healthcare. That's one thing I advocate for Timor-Leste, because it's such a small country. You cannot expect money coming from outsiders or from economic activities to pay on facilities, healthcare facilities, and also for medicine and all. So you have to embed it in a system where people can have access to the system, navigate the system, and at this point in Timor-Leste, there's not enough at all health facilities. Even for medicine, there's not enough stocks of medicines in Timor-Leste. So you should invest and decide on which model you are going to use, and then work your capacity to support the development of that model. Number 2, I appreciate that Timor-Leste is also non-nuclear and very much committed to non-nuclear. But one of the things that is developing in the region nowadays is the development of nuclear power plants. So nuclear power plants has been seen by several countries, many countries in the world, as a potential to reduce green gas emission, right? So standards and legal instruments now are being discussed, and even Indonesia is interested to have nuclear power plant. So, and Indonesia is interested to sell electricity to Timor-Leste, and there has been joint venture also in Oikuse, right, to provide electricity for Timor-Leste. The question is, because you are part of this new ecosystem of non-proliferation of nuclear, how can we also make sure that the proliferation of nuclear power plants is not going to be misused for other purposes? And how do you manage the waste of these power plants is also key issue for us. Last but not least is about non-preemptive strike. I think the very important issue nowadays is the tendency to exaggerate defense and security issues, more so than any people-oriented, people-centered issues like healthcare, education, and so on. Preemptive strike has been seen as a way to neutralize imminent threat. And this is campaigned everywhere. Across Europe, now they are racing to improve their defense spending and to buy more capacity of defense. And this is not going to have a neutral impact to us, because this kind of trend usually also bring a wave to ASEAN, to Southeast Asia. So one thing to remember is that no military attack can solve problems. Instead, it will create new problems. So, as a country that are passionate about peace, Timor-Leste and Indonesia should pay sufficient attention and do a joint campaign to make sure that we are not going into that direction of celebrating non-preemptive strike. So I stop at that. We can always discuss about the depth of it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Dina, for the insightful presentation. You mentioned about challenges of Timor-Leste after joining ASEAN, and one of your points is that the capacity of Timor-Leste in hosting hundreds of ASEAN meetings, and I'm wondering about the next or the trajectory of Timor-Leste when the country will be the chair in 2029. So within 4 years, do you think Timor-Leste can improve its capacity? And are there specific issues that will be prioritized during its chairmanship? Maybe we can talk later. Now we turn to the Q&A session. So before I pick a few questions from YouTube, I'll give chances to the audience here. You can raise your hand and mention your name and your institution. Anyone wants to ask? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Mabda and I'm from the Habibie Center. And thank you for all of the speakers for your excellent remarks and presentation. I have one question which I think is really relevant with one of the points delivered by Professor Ohlin, and I think maybe Dr. Dina or also Ambassador Joachim can also touch upon this as well. I think you mentioned about Timor-Leste maybe can craft for itself its own role and playing some sort of like constructive role in Myanmar especially, and I think in a lot of other discussions or concerns voiced by observers as well, there were a lot of concerns about what would Timor-Leste say to Myanmar, or how would their stance be once they become a member vis-a-vis Myanmar, especially with the fact that I think to a large degree the condition has yet to be resolved, of course. So my question would be, in terms of playing a constructive role, in what sense would that fill the gap that we witness in terms of the role that has been played by other ASEAN member states, for example? Because in a lot of sense, I think Indonesia, for instance, during its chairship, has also played its own role through, for example, doing lots of like diplomacy that is very much quiet, but of course I think that addresses the sort of course I think that serves its own purpose. So my question would be, what sort of gap will the constructive role will Timor-Leste play in terms of brokering or mediating some sort of like peace in Myanmar? Thank you.
Thank you, Mabda. Maybe I'll go to Professor Olin first to address Mabda's question. Please, Professor.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question on Myanmar. And I mean, it's a very complicated problem that has gone on for a very long time. I would say it's been the main problem for ASEAN since the 1990s. Human rights abuses in Myanmar, and I think basically what we have now is a kind of stalemate between the Myanmar military, the Tatmadaw, that controls maybe 30% of the territory or something like that. So the coup in 2021 was actually a failed coup the military does not control the territory. We have a very complex picture of different ethnic militias and different groups. And I think obviously for any kind of fair peace, there has to be dialogue between the different warring parties. I think the main question is from what position of strength do the different parties in the conflict come. And I think the most important thing is to strengthen the power of the democratic opposition and those aiming at a federal democracy in Myanmar. And ASEAN's approach so far, I think, has been inadequate in this respect, because even if the Myanmar junta leaders are not welcome to the summit and the foreign minister meetings, in all other ASEAN meetings they are representing Myanmar. It's quite obvious to me that Timor-Leste, representatives of Timor-Leste have been more outspoken in criticizing the Myanmar military. And from my perspective, what is needed is better relations with the opposition, the various opposition groups. And I think Timor-Leste could contribute with this connection. Of course, there is a lot of such links going on which are not publicly visible. But more pressure on the Tatmadaw is needed, and I can see that could come from Timor-Leste as a support for a few other member states in ASEAN that also would like to take a stronger position. But I mean, the risk of not doing more is that we have continued violence and a stalemate that continue to be a major legitimacy problem also for ASEAN, to have this completely illegitimate government that is actually responsible for genocide of the Rohingyas also. So yeah, to put more pressure and to strengthen links to the national unity government and to different ethnic groups that aim at some kind of federal democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Olin. Dr. Dina, you can add something, please.
Thank you. Allow me to answer, because to me, following the issue of Myanmar since the very beginning of 2012, one of the things that's often missing when people talk about Myanmar is to research about what's going on the ground. A lot of the information available to the international relationists is mostly about, bringing the issue into the table of ASEAN. No, it's not gonna ever work only through ASEAN mechanism. You have to develop a very creative approach to Myanmar if you really want to make Myanmar back to stability and united. Since ASEAN's approach to Myanmar's issue has been very slow, we have to admit, the ASEAN leaders meeting back after the coup was very timid one. It was not as responsive as many have expected. And the reason for that is because as people question or the leaders question about the relevance of ASEAN as all member states to fixing or helping Myanmar, because to them this is domestic issues. Now, therefore, the key there is to voice the impacts of what's going on in Myanmar to everybody else. That's number one. Indonesia should be one of those countries who voice very, loud voice about the impacts of what's going on in Myanmar to the rest of the ASEAN, actually. Number one, because of the growing ungoverned territories inside of ASEAN. Myawaddy is one area where recently we found hundreds of people becoming victims of scamming and perpetrators of scammers. A lot of people from the region now operate and doing scamming business in Myanmar. And do you think the people who support all this activity is the Tatmadaw? Not necessarily. So because there are weak governance by the Tatmadaw across the regions in Myanmar, there are many pockets like that, areas like that with ungoverned territories, no clear governance. But what's interesting is a report that I got from the ground that if you were in Yangon even, the situation is very normal. It's like normal in the sense of, everybody is just going to school, and then even diplomatic receptions are still ongoing, just like in Jakarta, big event, standing reception and all like that, with music and everything. So it's like nothing is going on. So the absence of governance is mostly affecting the locals, the people when they want to access electricity, maybe they want to access the economy in a much bigger sense, but because they have been for years being embargoed, they can survive just doing businesses locally. So therefore, if we want to push it through ASEAN, nobody ever discuss about the political model for governance. In a region, in an area, Myanmar is an area that's ruled by multiple ethnic groups, and they have weapons. Every one of them have weapons, and Tatmadaw has no control over the circulations of weapons and even the kinds of partnerships and cooperation, quote unquote, with external countries. That's number one. So unless you solve that problems, then who are you going to bring into the negotiation table? And what kind of model of governance is it going to help? That part is definitely the area, the zone for Myanmarese. But member states can help inspire, can help give them ideas of the models of cooperation where it's already circulation of weapons everywhere. Number two, rent seeking is happening everywhere across Myanmar. So you cannot talk about peace and democracy because it's too far off. The everyday activity is based on rents. So clearly somebody must discuss about it. At the G2G level, I'd like to highlight several information that maybe you don't know. The ambassadors of ASEAN member states in ASEAN, not everybody has the ambassadorship position. Indonesia plays just charge d'affaires. Why do I have to mention this? Because if you don't put an ambassador there, that means it's not a recognition for the sovereignty of Myanmar or the Tatmadaw as the governor. So Singapore and Vietnam refused to pull out their ambassador from Myanmar, even though it's already exceeding the time. Usually they should be coming back after 3-4 years. 3 or 4 years. They don't. Why? So they don't have to submit credential to the authority, the military regime. So this shows that there are ways to show and give pressures diplomatically or politically. And you mentioned, Professor Anders mentioned about the NLD, about the NUG, the opposition. The problem is they are all Bamar. They are still Bamar dominated, and they cannot penetrate into the other ethnic groups. That's why, and they're not accepted by the ethnic group. So they are only big names at the national level, but they cannot go into the area. So that's a very reality that's quite complex, which I think, you know, ASEAN should table this issue on political model for governance, try to inspire different models if you have militias on the ground and rent-seeking activities everywhere. But bilaterally or even trilaterally, quadrilaterally, let's assess. Diplomacy can be very flexible, actually. You don't have to be always just bilateral, regional. You can always craft, different models to break the silence, break the wall of silence to deal with the Myanmar issue.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dina. Ambassador Fonseca, would you like to add something? Sorry, Ambassador, we can't hear your voice.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No worries.
let me pick up on the question that you asked earlier at the end of my presentation and then continue with the recent ones. You were talking about what Timor-Leste can bring into ASEAN. Of course, a lot of the things have been mentioned by, some of the things have been mentioned by Professor Ulan and Dr. Harjo. And I am just adding some points to that. But I need to mention at this point already that none of this is not taken as a given. Timor-Leste has to work for it. Any benefit that Timor-Leste can bring into ASEAN has to be one which Timor-Leste works for. First is from the point of view of defense and security. With the Timor-Leste's full membership in ASEAN, ASEAN can now say that it has closed the southern flank of its border, which is the Timor Sea. It has an ASEAN member state taking care of that flank, and ASEAN can now say that from the security point of view, it is well taken care of. That area is well taken care of. Another one which I will mention is the double bridge. Timor-Leste is part of the Lusophone community, a community of countries with Portuguese as their official language, CPLP. So Timor-Leste can, of course, in addition to the links, the relationship that every individual member state of ASEAN has already established with Lusophone countries, Timor-Leste can help strengthen that relationship, being one of the members of the CPLP, as well as being part of the Pacific. Timor-Leste is from the map. You see, Timor-Leste is within ASEAN, but it is also at the edge of it, making it the link between ASEAN and the Pacific. Right now, Timor-Leste holds the status as an observer status of the Pacific Island Forum, but it needs to work to strengthen the relationship, make its presence in the forum more prominent in order for it to play a role as a bridge between the Pacific Island Forum and ASEAN. The other benefit that Timor-Leste's membership could bring is, right now we are still discussing with Australia about the development of Greater Sunrise Field, a multi-trillion dollar worth of oil and gas field. And Timor-Leste has actually explicitly invited ASEAN countries to participate in the development. Petronas, PTT from Thailand have been invited, and I hope that this can be an endeavor, a joint endeavor between ASEAN member states who are interested in petrochemical industry. Professor Ulan also mentioned about Timor-Leste's democratic identity. I think I agree that Timor-Leste can strengthen ASEAN's democratic credentials, being a democratic state. But again, this is not set in stone, because it is also risky being a member of ASEAN. Timor-Leste will be pressured to be more, assertive in relations to critique for being a member of ASEAN. So Timor-Leste does need to be firm in its principle in order to bring an added value into ASEAN. We know that ASEAN is an organization that makes decisions on the basis of consensus, but at least Timor-Leste can be the noisy one, at least bring in new voice for discussions before consensus are reached. So I think those are some of the added values that Timor-Leste can bring, besides the last one, economic one, which I'd like to mention. We just concluded the development of a very modern, efficient seaport on the Tibar Bay. And I think that this, if Timor-Leste works on the other supporting infrastructures, this can help dynamize the economy of the region, ASEAN, on this part of Indonesia, for example. The eastern part of Indonesia can benefit from this facility, because this is a very good facility for transshipment, to be used as transshipment hub for the region. Now, on the issue of Myanmar, I think that Timor-Leste can, of course, trust is a very important element in this. And actually, Dr. Dina, thank you very much for your intervention. It is very important to understand the issues in order for anyone, Timor-Leste or anyone else, to bring in a solution. I think we have been left with very little understanding about the situation in Myanmar because of the isolation itself. So I think if Timor-Leste can or cannot do anything, it depends on whether or not Timor-Leste can build trust with both the military as well as the opposition groups. And we do notice that the opposition has been dominated by one particular ethnic group. And I think it is important for Timor-Leste to encourage that if the opposition need to develop its credibility among the other, other component of the opposition, because it is a multi-ethnic country, and the opposition is not just one group. There are many groups that is composing the opposition, and it is very important that credibility internally is also strengthened in order for it to even promote itself as a negotiating partner, with the military. So I think one very important factor is developing trust. one question that I think is important for ASEAN member states to pose to both the opposition groups as well as the military is what kind of Myanmar do they want to have after the conflict? In any scenario, let's say if the military is defeated, what kind of Myanmar do they want to have? Or if the opposition is completely destroyed, what kind of Myanmar do the military want to have? Because we have that experience. We wanted to have a Timor-Leste which is peaceful. That is why in 1998 we changed the name of we changed the name of the form actually our umbrella organization from Maubere to Timorese. National Council for Maubere Resistance to the National Council for Timorese Resistance. That is in order to allow people who did not initially support the independence to support it, become part of the umbrella organization, because we wanted a Timorese that belongs to every a Timor-Leste that belongs to every Timorese. And that's why it is, to me, it's important to ask the same question to our friends in Myanmar. What kind of Myanmar do you want? A Myanmar where you want to live your life continually haunted by those who have been ousted, those you have destroyed, or a Myanmar where people of different ethnicity can live together? And I think that we are in 2025. How many years have they have been spent in waging war against one another? Every year that is used to wage war is 1 year that is not used to develop school, 1 year that is not used to develop health care facilities, 1 year that is not used to heal wounds from conflict. So I think facilitation of dialogue is important, but also they need to be, and also pressure. I agree, pressure is important, but they also need to be asked some very pertinent questions, and fundamental questions, like the ones I just asked. I think with that I would end my part of the response.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador. We also have two. Okay, before I turn to the question from YouTube, maybe I will pick two questions from the ground. Maybe Sun from ROK Mission, and then Reina from Tato, please.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. For giving me opportunity. And I think today is quite timely because I think at the moment the ASEAN Secretariat. Sorry, I'm Sun from Korean Mission to ASEAN. Sorry. I think at the mission, the ASEAN Secretariat at the moment, the Prime Minister Gusmaung is giving a lecture. So I think today will be very interesting to compare. I think today's seminar is quite interesting, but I think the one part, since I'm from the dialogue partner, I want to know about the DP's role in socializing Timor-Leste's interaction with the ASEAN. So I think it's very important to increase the Timor-Leste visibility in ASEAN, including Timor-Leste's officials to work in the ASEAN Secretariat and all that. And also, I think the panels also mentioned about the chairmanship in 2029, but I'm not very sure at the moment because even Myanmar, even though they joined the ASEAN in 1997, they only did a chairmanship only one time in 2014. So I think maybe Timor-Leste needs more time to socialize the ASEAN process. So I think in that sense, what dialogue partners, including ROK, can do more for Timor-Leste's visibility and capacity building and together with the ASEAN member states. That's my question. Yeah.
Thank you, Sun. Reina, please.
Hello, I'm Reina from Taipei Economic and Trade Office. My question is kind of echoing Sun's question, because given the ASEAN's recent and Taiwan's recent focus on digital governments and dealing with the emerging technologies as AI, semiconductors, and trusted networks. How might Taiwan and dialogue partners and global partners to collaborate with Timor-Leste to enhance Timor-Leste's digital governance capability and to build technological infrastructures and supporting Timor-Leste in digital and tech sectors? Yeah, this is my question.
Right, thank you, Rena. Maybe we can combine those two questions to all speakers. Dr. Gina would like to address first.
Maybe the one who is most suitable to answer this is Ambassador Fonseca. What he wants for Timor-Leste. Maybe a little note, yeah, because Ambassador Fonseca mentioned earlier about the importance of investment along with capacity building. My note there is that investments nowadays actually, we shouldn't imagine investment like 20 years ago or 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Investment nowadays can fall into areas that are not well governed so long as they get well protected by the local authorities, by the, even if it's, rent seekers, all of them rent seekers, so long as they can provide security for the factories or for the businesses to happen, it will be there. So it's very important actually to think about a mechanism and a system at the international as well as the local level connected, so that there's not what you mentioned earlier, the briefcase model of investment. Speaking about Myanmar, remind me of that phenomenon, because member states in ASEAN, actually, some of them actually benefit from this ungoverned territories. I cannot mention the name of the country because I don't know who is listening. Maybe, but you can please look up the data, because in the midst of all of this chaos, there are rising investments for ASEAN member states in Myanmar. So the question is, once you open Timor-Leste more to investment and economic cooperations, including dialogue partnerships, question is it going to fall into the areas and bring impacts that are positive to the greater people, or this is yet another another instance of the dialogue partners and all these member states benefit from Timor-Leste, but not the Timorese benefiting from it. About Reina's question, maybe my hint for this is that the level of education in Timor-Leste is still relatively low, lower than parts of the other member states. And I would like to highlight that also. I would like to give the example of Indonesia. To Indonesia, you may see lots of people here actually highly educated, right? Minimum bachelor degree. And many of you may be master and already doctoral degree. But the average education length of schooling in Indonesia is about 10 years only, which is SMP level. If you don't believe it, check out the BPS, the statistics. So before you talk about semiconductors, AI and everything, think about how you can improve the standards of education first in Timor-Leste. There are lots of international schools, by the way, and I don't know lots, maybe that's too much of saying, but in Dili, there are several international schools. And most people in Timor-Leste, especially the government officials, officers, send their children to private schools instead of the public schools. So maybe big questions, can you think about investing in the public sectors more than just enabling for this private sectors to grow, but without public sectors building its capacity, because if that happens, this inequitable distribution of benefits and opportunities will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. Ambassador Fonseca, please. You are muted, Ambassador. Yes.
This Timor-Leste to make it. Yeah. Plus a few other comments about the Timor-Leste's preparedness. I completely share the call for prudence made by Dr. Raharjo. We need to pick. We need to be selective about what we can do at this stage and what we cannot. In terms of how other countries can help, can assist, of course, now we have the Korean mission. Yeah, COICA is very active, including in the provision of technical training to civil servants and so on. I think these are the areas in which let's say the Korean mission have worked on are ones which are quite helpful for Timor-Leste's fully functioning in ASEAN, and I think this can be continued. And of course, Dr. Raharjo mentioned about the level of education, technical capacity is also limited. So I think you cannot really, it has to be step by step. And I think if priority areas can be identified with line ministries, especially in this context, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, then I think the assistance that Korean mission or any other mission can provide will be more targeted. And a real case scenario, let's say, let's host a meeting together between between Indonesia, co-host a meeting between Indonesia or any other member state in Dili with the support of an interested country, say Korea. That will really help from the very beginning to the end. But of course, these are decisions which have to be discussed and made with government officials, and they have to. Anyone who is interested to support must also get the buy-in of the government officials, because people can be sometimes quite proud and seeking assistance. Sometimes, it's not the easiest thing to do. But whether or not assistance is needed, as everybody has mentioned, and I completely share those opinions, there is the need for further assistance in order for Timor-Leste to make the most of its membership in ASEAN. I don't know if there is any other question I need to answer, in which case, please remind me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Professor Lin, please add your comment on this question.
All right. You actually asked me a question just after I finished my talk about the major urgent challenges, which I didn't answer. So I take the opportunity to briefly point out three what I consider to be major urgent challenges, and one of them, I think, at least partly, will also address the questions from the floor. But let me start by saying that when I, based on the Human Development Index, argue that Timor-Leste does not stand out when compared to several other members of ASEAN, this was, of course, not to say that, or to ignore the major challenges in terms of economic development that Timor-Leste faces. And I'd like to stress the urgent need to diversify the economy. I mean, in a time of urgent climate crisis, when we know that we basically need to stop using fossil fuels, it's of course extremely problematic to have an economy that is so almost completely dependent on oil and gas. So diversification of the economy is urgently needed, and hopefully membership in ASEAN will make it a little bit easier for Timor-Leste to do this. Second point, and this is what has been discussed by the other speakers a lot, about the urgent need to develop human resources, logistics, infrastructure, and so on. And I think there are many good initiatives going on. I think, for example, the University of Gadjah Mada, Yogyakarta, has a capacity building program that have been very active in Timor-Leste, and others too, and I think this can be developed quite a lot. And if we speak particularly about making Timor-Leste more visible in ASEAN, and focusing on a possible chairmanship already in 2029, that might be too much of a challenge, but I mean, there could be different solutions. One possibility might be to have a shared chairmanship between Indonesia and Timor-Leste, and have some of the meetings maybe in East Nusa Tenggara. So I think there are ways of solving this problem. And the final urgent challenge, and this goes back to my focus on human rights issues and so on, is that I think it will be a major challenge for Timor-Leste to keep this balance between continuing to being a strong progressive voice in human rights issues and still fitting in the not so human rights oriented ASEAN and its consensus decision making. But I know that there is great hope in Timor-Leste's membership from human rights activists in the region. I attended the ASEAN Civil Society Conference, ASEAN People's Forum in Kuala Lumpur a few weeks before the ASEAN Summit, and last year this gathering of civil society organizations from all over ASEAN was held in Delhi, and there is already a very strong networking, including Timor-Leste, but also great hope in having more of allies within ASEAN, because previously I think ASEAN human rights defenders have had to rely on individual supporters inside the ASEAN structure, like Dr. Dina, for example, in Aichar. And now there is great hope that Timor-Leste will contribute more people inside the ASEAN institutions which are sympathetic to civil society concerns and human rights in particular. But I think this is a major challenge to keep this focus inside ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Olin. All right, due to time constraint, I think we should wrap up our today's discussion and apologize for everyone join in person or online, that we can't accommodate your questions. And once again, please give a round of applause for all speakers. Thank you very much, Ambassador Fonseca, Professor Olin, and Dr. Dina, for taking the time and sharing your thoughts here. And I would like to thank our audience as well for actively participating in the discussion, both in this room and on YouTube. And please stay tuned to the Habibie Center social media channels, because next year we'll have a series of Talking ASEAN seminar with even more interesting topics. And thank you very much for your attention, and good afternoon.